Good morning and welcome to Listen In, Community, Conversations, Connection. I'm Pam Holland, your host for the show, and this is WOWD LP Takoma Park. Today I'm really excited to be here with Meaghan Murphy, who is one of the Cheesecake Sisters, and she and her sister, Caitlin, many of you may know as co-owners of Capital City Cheesecake right here in Takoma Park. So, Meaghan, say hello to our guests.
Good morning, Takoma Park. Happy Wednesday.
Yes, and I'm very, very grateful to Meaghan and all of my guests for getting up so early in the morning to come and speak with us about the value of listening in to your own inner wisdom. And I'm going to first start with a question that I always ask all of my folks, and that is, as a child, were you taught to listen in to your own inner wisdom?
Yeah, from a very young age. I don't think at the time I realized that I was being taught in different ways to listen to my inner voice, but I've always been surrounded with loving people, and at different times when there were challenges when I was young, I always remember my mom just sitting me down and encouraging me to keep trying and to, sometimes if I got frustrated, maybe walk away, So I always felt that as a child, no matter what circumstances I was facing, I was always in a loving surrounding environment that allowed me to kind of process those thoughts. And so I learned at a very young age to kind of listen inside.
And you were just telling me just before we went on air that your parents actually supported a lot of people in a lot of ways. You want to say a little bit more about the role they played in helping others in the community?
Yeah, my parents run a nonprofit called Mary House, and it works with families in transition. And so we grew up in a world where we didn't know at the time the family stories. To us, anyone that was in our home or that we were around, we treated as family. But as we got older, we became consciously aware that different families struggles at different points, and that my parents were committed to helping these families through their transitions in many different ways. And so I just always grew up in an environment where you gave of yourself, you gave to your community, and you worked together.
Yeah. And Meaghan had her son, Marcus, at a very young age. So do you want to say a little bit more about that? And
yeah, I had my son Marcus at age 15, and I would say it's probably one of my most vivid memories of the first time that I used meditation. I remember that I actually had my son with midwives, and so it wasn't at a hospital, so it wasn't a traditional birth. But I remember that when I started to go into labor, I had to dig really deep during those contractions. And at first, for myself, I'm not sure with other mothers, but definitely there was a moment of panic when your body starts to go through these different moments when you're in labor. And so at first, I initially panicked internally, and I didn't have an epidural. It was a natural birth. So there was times where I had to start to really dig deeper inside myself and start to look for that inner voice to understand that this is part of being a woman and that my body could handle giving birth, and that I had to mentally start tackling and telling my body to calm down. It's going to be a long night. I was in labor it was a long time ago, but I would say at least 12 hours. So, and it started at 8 p.m., so I was going to be in labor throughout the night. And so I just remember a point where I was like, that's it. I got to start to get into a rhythm. And I don't really remember how I got into that deep meditative state of mind. But there was every minute I would have a contraction, I would just get up and kind of rock myself back and forth. And I would just talk myself through it. And then when the contraction was done, I would rest. And then I just did that for hours. And so that's the first time I saw the strength of, your mind over your body. And I think I was young. I was 15, so there was definitely moments I lost my ability to meditate. But throughout becoming an adult and different stages, I've been able to reconnect with that side of, and I remember that was the first time I ever saw myself use it to get through a really difficult time.
Yes, and anyone who's given birth knows that I've just been reflecting. I didn't have my child until I was 35, and I also didn't have a happy birth experience. So I think I'm going to do a little bit more reflecting on that and how it might have been of value to me to listen in more closely.
I think I knew going into the birth that I wasn't going to have the epidural, and you have midwives and you're not in a hospital, that option is not there. So I knew going in that this was it. And so I was either going to fight the whole time, or I was going to start to dig a little deeper. And so being able to have that experience during the birth, definitely throughout my life, I've been able to connect with that side of myself and know that it existed at a very young age.
Right, because once you've been able to do it in that situation, certainly, rude drivers are not a big deal at all.
And the thing is that, I wanted, during that time, I used it for a very difficult situation. And the goal throughout my life is to use meditation for very positive experiences.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think that people, including myself, lose track of the benefit of meditating daily because they only apply it to stressful situations. And I've been trying to consciously apply it to amazing situations. And so although at times when I am stressful, I will go into those practices, sometimes just walking down the street, I want to get into that meditative state and take in that the sun is out, that people are smiling. And so sometimes I feel like people lose that connection with meditation because they're like, well, everything's great in life. I don't really need to meditate because I'm doing great. And if you don't do it every single day and it doesn't become part of your lifestyle, then you'll end up finding yourself back in those situations. So it was great at 15 that I tapped into it for a very difficult time. But now at 32, I tap into it for many different reasons. So that's really nice.
And you do have a daily practice.
Daily, every morning.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you journal as well. Do you journal daily as well? Or
I don't journal daily, but I love to. A lot of people I've read over time, when I look at other people who do meditation, they say just keep it always near your bed. And so it just sits there. And there's nights where my thoughts are a mile a minute and I just have to grab it and start jotting down, or my thoughts are so powerful that I want to capture what my mind is thinking. So there are times I could go weeks without using my journal, but the best part is when I see an idea that I had a year ago in my journal, and then I see it actually happen.
Right.
That's the magic of having the journal. It's like, wow, there it is on paper, and now here it is in action.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to have the journal near me.
I think it can help us to looking back can help us to recognize, yes, I created this.
100%.
I created this because you've already moved on.
Right.
You're creating new things already.
And sometimes I find that when you have that initial thought, like the radio station, there was a moment where this was a thought, and as you go through the process of that thought becoming reality, you don't get to appreciate it. So what I love about journals or photos is being able to tap back to wow, look how far have you come. You're not enjoying it because you're on to your next task.
Right.
But if you actually look at the beautiful process of thinking Takoma Park needs a radio, and then how many people you called into your frequency to make this happen, and where it is today, sometimes we don't get a chance to celebrate that magic and then say, wow, we accomplished this. If we apply the same energy, the world's, there's no limit to what you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another initiative where you used that drawing people of the same frequency was and now I'm blanking on the name.
Oh, Unity in the Community.
Unity in the Community, yes. So say a little bit more about that from the perspective of, drawing people from the same frequency into a project.
Yeah, I mean, the Unity Community started from a place of me being a mother, and a mother sons. My son is biracial and my stepsons are African American. And so it was just during another difficult time where we're watching and we're witnessing all throughout the nation incidents between officers and civilians and people trying to process it. And I think at that time, the conversations in my household were just becoming very difficult for me because each case that was being presented, there were no excuses. There was no justifications that, so your kids are looking for you to explain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can't explain something, you feel really stuck as a parent. And that's your job, is to provide that safety feeling for your kid. And so as a mom, Unity and Community, I meditated for years. And at some point it's like, okay, you meditated enough about this. Why are you waiting for other people to start something in your community? Why aren't you doing it? And I feel that in these situations when we're witnessing things that are unimaginable, we're waiting for a leader to just jump out, or we're already have in our mind who should be leading the movement. And you start saying, well, city elected officials should be doing this, and officers should be doing this, and community. It's like, well, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of me continuing to meditate on which group I should go with, which movement, which organization, which nonprofit, I started to ask myself, what are you doing as an individual, and what resources are you using that are already available to you? And so I wanted to show my sons what it meant to take action, mm-hmm. that when you want to see change, then it needs to start with yourself. And so I was very conscious to include them in the whole process of, I'm going to use Capital City Cheesecake, my resource, a community platform, to create change where we are always strengthening relationships within our community, that we're being a proactive community, that we're not waiting for a headline to surface here to make us move and all of a sudden scramble to fix it, or we didn't know this, we weren't aware that this happened in Takoma Park. And I wanted to be proactive, and so I use that, I believe in frequency. I believe that you can attract others who want the same frequency. And so Mayor Kate Stewart came in for her coffee, and I saw the opportunity to just start asking questions about what the community is doing, how is community responding. And through those conversations, my path crossed with Captain Tyrone Collington, and we started talking, and the three of us are just in alignment, and we want to always create opportunities to strengthen relationships. And so Unity Community was created to always work on those opportunities for community residents, for businesses, for Takoma Park Police, for city elected officials, to be in positive atmospheres where we can change perception mm-hmm. of one another. I think that's very important, specifically with the youth, changing perceptions of how they see officers, and changing perceptions how officers see the youth, changing perceptions of how we see our city elected officials, and really taking it back down to we're all humans. Mm-hmm. Humanity is very big for me. And so I think that what happens sometimes when we watch these videos is that we forget that we're people, and we're all people, and we all have feelings, and it's very overwhelming, but we got to connect back with that human side. And so when you create opportunities where officers can celebrate kids' achievements, it's a perception moment for both sides. Mm-hmm. When officers show up at schools, kids are naturally going to think someone's in trouble.
Right.
And that should be a natural feeling because, we all know that the police are here to make sure everything stays in order. But I don't want my son to only associate officers coming to Blair High School or to any school because someone's in trouble. I also want him to say, hey, Captain Collington, oh, are you here today for the award ceremony? Of course I am. I want to create opportunities where the officers can see my kid achieving mm-hmm. goals. And so when he sees them on a basketball court or at a park, it's oh, that's Marcus. He goes to Blair High School. That can only happen. Those real relationships can only happen if community residents and businesses are creating those opportunities. And so that's the real goal of the initiative, is to look for those opportunities on a continuous basis. Mm-hmm. Not once a year you can go here, mm-hmm. and if you miss it, well, you have to wait till next year. I want to be proactive and always having those opportunities for all of us to constantly connect with each other and build real relationships. So if something was to occur in Takoma Park, that relationship will kick into action, and we'll be as a community tackling it versus individuals trying to cope with it.
Now, I know that the initiative is just, a little bit in its infancy, correct? But when did it start?
We started at the end of July, and the initiative is in constant work. It's very hard to sometimes describe it to people because it's not an organization, it's not a nonprofit. It's an energy movement. And so what I do with the initiative, we just did a screening of the documentary, The 13th, and we did it at Washington Adventist University. There was professors there that wanted to screen it, and so we just met with the professors, and we were able to actually screen it there and invite the community to come out and watch it as a community, which is more powerful than if you watched something individually. And so there's these opportunities popping up, and it's my job to try to get that information out to the community. So I kind of act as, there's things happening all the time. We just don't know how to connect to it all the time. And so trying to connect people to what's already going on in the community is one of the goals of the initiative. And right now we just have a Facebook page, Unity in the Community. You can find that through Facebook, that I post, and I try to post different things through email. But we're in the beginning stages, so trying to get out the word is something I'm constantly working on. But I'm committed to just making relationships happen. And so, the Takoma Park Police Department partnered with the Boy Scouts pancake dinner this year, and it was awesome. And the relationship building, changing perception, it happens, because when people first walk in, it's like, oh, okay. Kind of people get a little nervous around officers, and I think officers are used to also being, used to having, their demeanor they're always in attention, like, okay. So it's like trying to get the relationship where everyone, you stop looking at a uniform, you stop feeling that pressure is the goal of the initiative. It's to get us to a point where it's like you're laughing together and you're having a connection that's a little bit deeper. And so that's the goal of the initiative, is to create those opportunities. So I'm always looking for those opportunities and making those connections.
So the best way for people to become involved or to know more about the initiative would be to go to the Facebook page. And if they do that, will they see ways to learn more? Or would they have to have a Facebook page themselves? Or
right.
How would they learn? How would people learn more is my question.
The goal is to be able to, one day for me to be able to create a landing page that has, different ways people can connect. But it's going to be me having to connect through a lot of different, connecting with The Voice and connecting with Takoma Radio and connecting with other ways to get the word out beyond the Facebook page. I do a lot of meetings, and so part of the initiative that's behind the scenes that people don't get to see is all the relationship building I have to do. So although, the things haven't been rolling out as quick for people, it's just because the relationships I have to create first with the Captain Collington and with Mayor Kate Stewart and other city elected officials. That takes a lot of work. I'm also running Capital City Cheesecake, and I'm a mom. And when I first started this process, it was to strengthen my relationship with my local police department. And it was to strengthen my relationship with Mayor Kate Stewart. And I saw through my strengthening my relationship, other people would want that opportunity too. So, it did start in August, and we did a big initiative kickoff, and we collected a lot of information. But, I meet people weekly, and it's going to take a lot of foundation work of that relationship. So I try to explain to people when people say, what's happening with the initiative? I try to say this is a ongoing process, and to try to heal wounds that have existed for a long time is not going to happen overnight. And being proactive is saying that there is a process. And so right now I'm in the process of building these relationships of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And once these relationships of trust are in place, then those opportunities will continue to be available to the community. Mm-hmm. But I do encourage the whole, by me putting myself out there, and by me, there is a video of me. I went to the city council that people can look up, and I did speak to my city elected officials. So what I try to talk to people when they say, like, I want to get involved, I think the first way you get involved in this energy movement is by showing up to city council meetings. It's by showing up to meetings in the community. That's where it starts, because you're trying to attract people on the same frequency. And so when I went to the screening of the 13th, at the end of it, different people got up and were talking. And this one man stood up, and he said, he didn't necessarily apologize for not being aware, but he said, I'm just in a state of shock of, this documentary is amazing.
Say a little bit more about what the documentary covers.
Yeah, the documentary is about the jail system.
Okay.
And how throughout years and years, slavery has it hasn't disappeared, it's just changed forms. Mm-hmm. And so that if you actually look into like the 13th Amendment and you look at jails and what's happening, that's a world that we need to pay more attention to and be more consciously aware of what's occurring. It's like out of sight, out of mind. So when people go to jail, they're really not part of the community anymore. And so we don't really think about people behind bars, but what's happening, and then it really starts to talk and get deeper into that. And so when you watch this film as a community, and I think there was a moment, there's always these aha moments, and it could be very overwhelming, where he was just like, I'm like, in his late 60s, like, what? Like, how is this, how did this go under my radar? I feel I'm a very conscious person. I feel that I love everybody, and I really felt that we were going in a direction in our communities that this wasn't happening. And so when you have that moment, it's very difficult. So to be able to process it with a community, and for me to say to him, he kept saying to us, what do I do with this? That was his question. And he said it out loud. And I think a lot of people always ask me, I want to get involved now. Tell me where to go. And my answer is, I don't have an answer. But what I can say is that there are resources already available. You're going to have to seek them out.
Yes.
And so when I started the initiative, I wasn't seeking an actual initiative. I was seeking a relationship with community members. Specifically, I was seeking a relationship. I don't ever want to have my first experience with my police officers having to call in a horrific crime or an as-needs basis, right? And so part of me was like, how do I approach my officers and ask them real questions, and I don't even know their names? Those are moments you have to have. That's what meditation is for, right? When I was meditating and I watch things and I'm mad, like when you watch videos, you get emotional. When I got emotional and I'm like, I want answers, and I think a lot of people I want answers. You want answers, but you approach people and you don't even know their name. You don't know their story.
Right.
You don't know. And so what happens with social media, and this is what the initiative does bring up, what happens with social media is if I see a video that happened in Texas and it was an officer and a community resident, when I see the officer in Takoma Park, my brain doesn't separate them because it's a uniform. And so when you go to your local police department, you're asking questions about other cases in other states, these officers are kind of like, I don't have those answers.
Right.
I wasn't there, I'm not them, and I don't operate that way. But the problem is there's no relationship. So anyone becomes defensive when someone starts asking them questions.
Right.
Someone comes in the Capital City Cheesecake and starts asking me questions like, well, New York, is this New York style cheesecake? What kind of cheesecake is this? And why is it miniature? And why is it not a slice? I become defensive because I'm kind of like, because this is who we are and this is how we do. I think anytime questions come at you and there's no relationship,
right,
emotions can get very high. So my goal is that through this process, through me connecting and building relationships, that if I ever have to ask hard questions, the person I'm asking knows my intention.
Right.
And my intention is not to offend people. My intention is to have a deeper understanding of what's happening. And I want to be able to provide resources to everyone in my community and how do you do that is you have to first find out what they need, not
Right.
what you think they need.
Right.
There's a difference.
So I think I'll offer as at least one gentle challenge to our listeners is when you prepare to ask someone a question, whether it's a huge question or a relatively small question,
yeah.
like why don't you put the cheesecake in slices,
Yes.
be very conscious of your tone and perhaps pause for a moment and think about your word choices and the relationship you have with that person. If you don't have a relationship with that person, you need to be extra careful about your word choices, right?
Yeah, even as simple as and it sounds silly to people, but when I go to the grocery store, this one time I walked up to a worker and I said, where's the jelly? And they turned around and said, hi, I'm doing well, thank you. And at first I was kind of taken back, and I said, wow, that was really rude. You didn't even say, excuse me, hi, how are you today?
Yeah.
Do you know where the jelly is?
Right.
It's those simple things. And so if you want to start to have inner peace and you want to strengthen relationships, then you have to approach the situations with that same energy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you approach it with anger and frustration, and you aim at people who don't even know why it's being aimed at them, then you're going to get the same reaction that you yourself are putting out there.
The energy that you just put out is
Right.
the energy that's going to come back to you.
And what I'm trying to create for my sons, and I think any parent, is I'm trying to teach them that there's a process, and that part of the process is seeking out wisdom and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And to seek out wisdom and knowledge takes patience.
In a curious way, and in a compassionate, curious, questioning way, we can learn so much more than in the where's the jelly.
Yeah, exactly. And then for all you know, you could have changed that person's whole course of their day because someone took the time to ask how they were.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know when you transfer energy where that energy is going to go.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that someone honking in the morning at you can make you yell back, what's wrong with you? And then if your kid's in the back seat and they were having a great morning, now they're like cranky, and then you take them to school, and when they walk in, the teacher says something like, you're a minute late. Like, great, of course I'm late. And my mom was all mad. You know, you don't understand that, you know,
The ripples.
energy is never lost. You just transfer it. And I believe it's an individual responsibility to make sure that if negative energy is transferred to you and you accept it, that you end it there, that you don't transfer it.
Awesome.
And so if you need to meditate, you need to go for a walk, break a pencil, if you transfer that, you need to be consciously aware that you transfer that because it's very powerful. And I don't think people think sometimes how powerful that is.
Right.
And so,
well, I hate that we have to wrap up because I could talk about this all day, but I think it's a very good start to thinking about how we attract things to us energetically. And you can learn more about Unity in the Community at their Facebook page. And if you think something's missing there, then volunteer to fix it. Maybe somebody knows how to create a landing page and would like to help out with that.
Yeah, and people can always stop by. I mean, I'm always available to meet. They just have to request to meet. But if people, you know, need more information, they can always. I'm always at the Cheesecake Place, so they can stop by and talk to me. But it just requires patience and understanding that this is an ongoing initiative. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's a healing process.
So this is WOWD LP Takoma Park. I'm Pam Holland, and this is Listen In Show, Community, Conversations, Connection. We're here first and third Wednesdays at 8 a.m. So our next show will be later in December. I think it's around the 18th or something like that. So, sorry, I'm not so good about dates, but our theme music is I Don't Want to Go to Sleep Tonight by Beth Ronaldo and Scott Holland. And thank you so much for listening.